with Aleesha. This is just a series where I talk to extraordinary women, and the purpose of the series is to shed light on stories of these women and what we don't usually get to hear. I feel like it's a great way to show women in a different and diverse light. And today's guest is Meriame. Who's a physicist and science communicator. Hi, Meriame.
Hello, thank you for having me. I love this and I love what you do, so thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. I love how energetic you are. And the reason why I chose Meriame because I follow her on Instagram, I follow her on Facebook as well, and I've seen her blog posts and stuff, and she's actually been doing it for quite a while. Like online science communication. You're a researcher in physics, and you're actually one of the only, you've been in experiences where you're one of the only females in the room, especially in physics.
Yes. So I started off basically as the only girl in my physics classroom at school.
Yeah.
And it was just this weird experience where all my teachers were like, oh, you're clever, you should do medicine. And I had friends tell me that, and I started to sit in that classroom and I was like, oh, have I made a mistake? Should I change career? And I loved my physics teacher. And then I was just like, no, actually, I'm going to stay. I don't care what people say. And I have this how the horses have blinkers.
Yeah.
I don't see anything else. I'm I just want to do that. And so that's basically what I did, and followed my passion. And I actually went back into that school and did a science club because I was like, if I was told by my own teachers that I shouldn't take the subject, then I need to change this.
Yeah.
And so I did that for 2 years alongside my degree. And I was like, I need to be that role model for the students because they could relate to me because I was in the same situation as them, I was in the same classroom. And so, basically the first year I had about maybe 10 out of 30 girls. And then the second year I had maybe 20, and then we were oversubscribed, and then it was kind of a mess because we were breaking safety rules and stuff, and there was too many kids, and so I really felt good about that, just kind of changing that perception and stereotype basically at that school. And then I went on to bigger things and kind of changing the idea that physics is a man subject or it's masculine, when it's not. It's just how the world works, and if you have a curious mind, if you want to learn more, then you just do it. So that's basically the story behind that.
Yeah, so I think it kind of relates to what you said now, but I'm so curious of why you're so passionate about showcasing your work online. You always, any research you do, any cool physics facts, you always showcase it online, whether it be your Instagram, whether it be a blog post. How come you're so passionate about, just putting it online?
Yeah, so it kind of follows on from the previous story in the sense that I was always kind of told, physics isn't for you, you don't fit in. And when I started going to university and I started seeing other people, there were other women that were doing it, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And so I just remembered what I felt like in school. And I was like, I really thought that there was no hope for me in this field, that I wasn't made for this field and that I shouldn't do it. And so I started to actually believe that in certain places in my life. And so I decided that I wanted to change that perception. I wanted to change that idea that physics is not for certain people. It should be for everyone if you're passionate about it.
Yeah.
And so I started off doing the science club, and then that led me to a gig with the Institute of Physics, and they let me write an article for them. And then I made a Twitter, and then it kind of blew up, and then I just kind of caught the physics bug, and I wanted other people to catch it as well, because I really love what I do, and you can change the world with stuff that I do. And so I want other people to enjoy their career as much as I do. And so if this is something that they're interested in, why not speak up about it? And so there are so few people, at least so few women in my field, that talk about their work. And so I wanted to be that person. I wanted someone to look at me and be like, oh, she looks like me, maybe I can do this subject as well. Because growing up, I didn't really have those role models. My physics teacher was a guy. Most of my lecturers, 90% of my lecturers at university, were all male as well. And so I just never saw someone that looked like me. And so I kind of call myself a minority squared. So I'm a woman in physics, but also a woman of color in physics. Yeah. And so I wanted to put that face to that work. And so if you can make the two connections together, because down the line, we are basically humans, and we like human interactions, and we like seeing people that do the same stuff as us, or we can relate to them. And so if I could post, especially with Instagram, if I could post my face with my work, then that can like initiate that reaction of like, oh, that person does that, and I think that's really cool. I want to be like that person. And so that's kind of how this whole thing started. And people really like it. And so I wanted to do more and get more people interested. And yeah, it kind of blew up from there.
No, it's amazing and it's so interesting. I feel like physics has such a bad perception, even like among everyone. It's not even a girl issue. I feel like people are like literally afraid of physics. They think it's so
Yes.
hard. They think it's just you have to be super smart to do it. I feel like there's so many negative, like even I thought that. And growing
Mm.
like just recently I've been starting to just read about like space and how just interesting and diverse physics is that I never even looked at because I was just like I have to be it's just too complex for me. What
Mm.
do you enjoy the most about physics, and what do you wish like that more people knew?
I think following on from that, like whenever people ask me what I do and I say I'm a physicist, one of the first reactions, or the majority of people tell me, "Oh, you must be so clever,"
Yeah.
or "That's so hard. That's such a hard subject." And I think I don't know how we've got this like
Yeah,
idea,
yeah.
but I think it's because with physics you have to know maths, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of people tend to I don't know have that idea about maths as well of like, oh, it's hard or it's difficult, but sometimes all you need is just a good teacher. And I
Mhm.
think if we're encouraged in school to kind of like um, look out for things like read something about physics or like read something about some maths that you might not know about, then maybe we wouldn't have this idea.
Yeah.
And like at least for me at school, we only had one physics teacher, and so we already have that problem of like, oh, there's not enough people telling us about these things. And then so from that, I was already like, oh, well, if there's not enough people doing that, then clearly something's wrong with this subject, right? Maybe it's boring or maybe it's
Yeah.
too hard. And so already at school, we're already kind of told that. And I think if we had more people come in and be like, this subject is cool and you can do it too, and like all it takes is someone to kind of break it down for you
Yeah.
and be able to understand it, and it's fine. And like I'm not gonna lie, like I was that person at the beginning where I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, like this is hard. And I
Yeah.
think that's the same with every subject, right? Every subject is hard in their own way,
Mhm.
and if you just kind of give it time and invest like effort into that subject, you can be good at it. And
Yeah.
I personally don't believe in the word like clever. I just think if you put hard work and you're passionate about something, those two together can lead to something great in that field. And so at least that's what I've done. Like I've
Mhm.
just put in a lot of work and a lot of enthusiasm into my subject, and then that's led me to where I am now. And I think if people kind of not listen to what everyone else is telling them, then
Yeah.
it wouldn't be like
As
that
that,
hard to kind of
yeah.
put a step in that field. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I really hate it when people tell me that. I'm like, no, 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 no. It's just I like this subject,
Yeah.
and that's it. That's the end of the story, you know.
No,
But yeah.
yeah, I completely agree with like my experience with physics and the people around me. It's just
Mhm.
even before starting like revising the subject, it just seemed like
Yes.
such a massive burden in like secondary school, that I couldn't even like. Just because I thought of it as a hard thing, I was automatically
Mhm.
less motivated. I put
Yes.
less effort in, and that's why it just basically seemed harder. Just because it was just it had that, especially physics. I feel like other sciences,
Mhm.
like even maths, doesn't have that because I guess physics is a mixture of like both the sciences and maths.
Yes. And maths. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
so
was your physics teacher good, enthusiastic,
well, our
or
physics teacher was really strict, and she was really
okay?
like hard, like yeah. So even the teacher terrified us as well. So on top of that,
Oh
we
no.
found the
Yeah.
subject even more daunting. So I was just like,
Yeah.
I was in a way happy to not take it at A level.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
so but it's crazy because it now looking back, and now when I read stuff on physics, it's so interesting, it's so diverse, and yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people are missing out, especially with
Yes.
physics.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can read it
Exactly, because
like
I
yeah,
feel like with biology, because it's your body, you can kind of relate to it more.
yeah,
Whereas like there's certain things in physics, like quantum stuff, which is really really small that
yeah,
you don't see every day, or like astrophysical stuff that you like, you need telescopes or whatever to see stuff. And so sometimes I think because of that, you can't really relate to
Yeah.
it, and so some people struggle with that
And some,
connection as well.
yeah, some concepts are
Whereas
so
if,
abstract as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But all it takes literally is like one YouTube video to kind of break it down, or like something like that, and I think people can get hooked into it, and then do some cool stuff with
Yeah,
it. So yeah.
definitely. And it's amazing how you're doing that as well, to break it down and break down the negative stereotypes about even women in physics, but just physics in general as well. Because I feel like if people knew more about physics, and especially women as well, women of color, I feel like a lot more girls would take it, because it's just, especially STEM subjects, they're just so interesting and diverse, and they use a lot of the skills. So
Yeah.
it's great the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, what does being a woman in STEM mean to you?
For me,
Yeah.
I think for me, I just love doing what I do, and I think by looking at like numbers of how many people like me are in my field, that's the bit that kind of I want to change.
Yeah.
And so being a woman in STEM to me is kind of being, can I be that role model for somebody else to encourage them to come in, so that we can make a bigger community, so that they can enjoy a subject that they probably never knew that they would enjoy. And so for me, being a woman in STEM is kind of like, I do feel like sometimes I have this responsibility to be like,
Yeah.
oh, let's share some stuff so that we can get more people like me in this field. And so to me, being a woman in STEM is kind of like, let's start this community, let's get more people into this field, and yeah, have a good time, basically.
No, yeah, that is a good way of looking at it. And for girls that are just starting, maybe they're in secondary school, maybe they're just starting university, and they love science. What's one thing that you wish you knew, or what's one piece of advice that you would give them?
Okay, I think for people in school at the moment, I would say, especially considering my experiences in the past, never listen to anyone that's negative, never listen to anyone that says you can't do something, because I was told at school that I would never go to university, and then I ended up going to one of the best universities in the
Oh
UK.
my
And then
goodness, you
now
were
I'm
told you
here
would
like at
never go to
Stanford. And so,
university.
thank you. And so I want people to know that whatever their background is,
Yeah.
no matter how much money you have, where you live, where you're from, if there's an opportunity, grab it. If there is something that you really like, spend time, do stuff in that field, have an experience, go out there and like talk to people, network, and ask them questions about something that you're passionate about, because it really doesn't matter what these negative people tell you. It's like what you do with your life. And if you put effort into something, you can do amazing things. And I just want people to know that it really doesn't matter where you're from, what you have, you can make something great with the opportunities that come your way. And so basically, yeah, just do you, do what you're passionate about, and yeah, just surround yourself with like positive people and support that will help you do what you want to achieve.
No, yeah, that's amazing advice, and yeah, I agree with it as well. There's going to be a lot of barriers along the way, and yeah, sometimes you're going to feel left out, things like that. But especially if you're passionate about it, it's the most important thing is just to focus on that. A lot of
Exactly.
women say there's a big jump between their education life and their working life. What do you think the biggest surprise is working in like a more male dominated field?
I think for me, when I notice it the most is kind of like in meetings when my research group is in a room, and then I've noticed that like, oh, sometimes I'm like the only girl in the room, and then it does intimidate me sometimes. Where I'm like, oh, should I speak? Should I put my hand up? Should I say something? Is my but also being less senior. So like I work in a research group here, but in a national lab, and I'm the youngest in the group. So not only that, like I feel like as a like a junior basically in this field, or in my research group, I feel like sometimes I'm too scared to say something, and there are occasions where I do feel like, oh, I will be a bit silent, but I'm trying to like counteract that, and I'm trying to be like, no, my voice is just as important. If I want to say something and I feel like I can add something to this conversation, then why not? And so that's still something I'm learning. But the bit that I do find hard sometimes is being in a room where it's like kind of intimidating, noticing like there's all these like senior males around you, and you're like this junior female in this room, and trying to get your voice heard in that sense. And I think part of it is my own barrier.
Yeah.
And then another bit is like do I feel comfortable in this room as well? And so, yeah, those are things that I noticed the most having moved out here to California and working in a research group, which is primarily male. But like working in the lab and stuff, I think because I have my equipment and I don't have to kind of talk about things, I can just do my work and it feels comfortable. But yeah, as soon as I reach like a research group meeting, then I'm like, oh, this is scary. But I think the steps to that is kind of you have to build your confidence. And so you have to kind of, at least for me, I work on my work and practice it in a sense. And like I do this thing where like if I do want to say something in a group meeting, I rehearse it beforehand. So I'm like, okay, this is how I'm going to say it. And that way I can kind of like prep myself before I go in and stuff. So yeah, for me, it was kind of like the research group meetings that kind of threw me off at the beginning.
Yeah, actually, statistics even show that confidence, especially women that are in the minority as well, is a big issue. It causes a lot of different barriers. It prevents them from getting promoted or getting heard just because they don't feel safe in that space. So yeah, just feeling comfortable and maybe not overthinking it sometimes as well. Like
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, I feel like in a lot of situations, maybe it's not the case for every situation, but people are usually welcoming, of different ideas. You just need to speak up a bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So, who's been an inspiration for you in like the kind of science world that you've looked up to?
Excuse me. I think the first role model in my life was, so my mum is from North Africa. My mum and dad are both from North Africa. But my mum in Africa basically was like, she went to the Institute of like Technology and Electronics. And so I already kind of grew up in an environment where like, and my dad was a handyman. So I grew up in like kind of fixing the toaster, fixing the TV and stuff like that. So I was already introduced to kind of electronics and like what is normally considered like masculine subjects. And then my mum was kind of like, she would talk about electronics like it was nothing. And so I think primarily just growing up with that, I didn't realize this until I got into my physics classroom and I was the only girl. I was like, but this is normal. I grew up with this, you know? And so it was kind of like I noticed later on that having that environment at home where I was free to ask questions and like, break things, fix them, learn about how things worked, that really set me in good stead to be like, no, I'm going to be my own independent person. And if I like this subject, then I will do it, because my mum did exactly the same. And so I just thought, if my mum can do that subject and she really likes it, and I really loved it as well, doing it with her when I was younger, then why not do that? And so I think my mum is kind of my first role model in this field. And then when I got to university, you would see people win like Nobel Prizes. So like there was recently someone in basically a big field in laser physics. And so she won a Nobel Prize and I was like, whoa, like she was like one of the leads in this thing. And so it ends up being like, okay, we're getting more and more exposure to these women. But for me, the Instagram community kind of really helped me along because, like I said before, there were times where I was the only woman in a group meeting or whatever. And so being able to kind of share my story and find out other people's stories, where even though they weren't nearby, maybe across the world or whatever, it's nice to know that somebody else is kind of going through the same thing and we can support each other and kind of inspire each other as well. And so being on social media later on in my life kind of helped me see that there are other people in the same field, that they're doing really cool stuff and they're like continuing on, because there are parts of me where I'm like, oh, maybe I should give up now, maybe this is enough. Or but then I see other people's stories and they're killing it and I'm like, why not, let's carry on, let's do this, And so the Instagram community was really nice. And I think for younger people now being more on social media, I think that's always been a really positive thing for me. Just seeing people, whether that's like somebody your age, just going through the same thing, maybe going through exams with you or like applying for grad school or whatever it might be. It's just kind of nice knowing, because you might not know someone directly near in your area, but somebody like maybe across the world can like give you tips or whatever. And like I love doing that as well. People ask me questions and I'm like, this is how you can do this or whatever. And I think it's just a really nice platform as well.
It is, and exactly what you said. It's you can always you realize because there's a lot of women that are like you. They're just not like physically there,
In your
but
area.
like around the world. you can just see so many women are just so passionate about, science and technology, and they're, like you said, they're all doing amazing things. They're all in research, or they're doing, starting their careers in those fields. So it is really inspiring to see, them just pushing through and sharing their stories as well. What do you think are some ways that we can get younger girls into, more STEM subjects? I guess you did briefly mention, like, I guess social media as one. Do you think schools could, have programs or things like that?
Excuse me.
Yes,
So for me, I actually wrote my personal statement applying for medical school. And then my physics teacher took us on a trip to one of the national labs in the UK near Oxford. And over there, I heard about medical physics, and I was like, wow, I can help people, I can do maths, and I can do physics all in one. I was like, oh my God, this is insane. And so that trip changed my decision. And I was
yeah,
like, okay, actually, do I really want to be a medical doctor? Like, I can't see people suffer, so I'm going to be terrible at this. So it was that moment where I was like, actually, let's go do a degree in physics and see where it will lead me.
mm-hmm.
And I think more schools need to get involved with that. And I think there's a lot of schools that don't have physics trips or physics dedicated trips. And so, I mean, they will take you to like the science museum and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think for me personally, I think schools should go into research labs like that and see what actual scientists are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And having that conversation with somebody that's doing, I don't know, helping like cancer or making like x-ray machines or whatever it might be, just having that conversation with a real person, a real scientist doing really cool stuff, and hearing what their opinion is on their work, because I'm sure they're really, really passionate about their field, otherwise they wouldn't be there. And so I think more kids need to be exposed to research or like real science. And there is this thing called like the Institute of Research in Schools, which basically encourages school students to do their own research at like the age of 16 to 17 to 18. And so that exposes them to like writing science papers, to analyzing data. And so I've been involved with quite a few schools that do that. And it's just amazing seeing these kids like do research that will be published later on, and them being exposed to that field. And then they get to meet maybe astronauts or like other scientists in like local universities and stuff. And so every kid that I've known that's been in like participated in that program has loved it and basically done science on at higher education. And so I think we need to just make stuff like that spread more and more kids involved with that. And I came from a low income background, and so I was put on programs that allowed me to go into university and have like interview prep. And I think programs like that in the UK, at least in comparison to the US, I find are way bigger, and more students get more kind of value from those programs in the UK. And so I think personally, stuff like that, getting kids exposed to real scientists would be amazing.
Most definitely. I feel like, again, it's hands-on experience as well. That's so important. It's doing those, even in primary schools as well. It's doing those research. That's the first time I've heard, schools really instituting research properly into it, and even experiment stuff like that. I was lucky in my, during my A levels, I actually had a good exposure to that. One of our kind of courseworks was actually, we had to choose our own topic, and we had to actually research about it, do our own experiments, and provide actual studies about it. And I felt like with that I just learned so many fundamental skills, from referencing to reading these journal articles to actually carrying out experiments in like really precise conditions and all of that. And that really got me exposed, and it really built the foundation going on to university, and it really built that passion as well that I probably would have never had. And I feel like we get a lot of we need a lot of exposure to, as you said, with those kind of subjects. And I feel like a lot of people would be more people would be interested as well. It's crazy that you also mentioned about medicine as well. I feel like a lot of people that get slightly better grades or are seen as like the clever in the class are directed towards that and pushed towards that, where there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with going into medicine, but I feel like it kind of like boxes everyone in before they even begin.
Yes.
Get, you know, kind of finding out what their passions are, kind of finding out what they like. And I feel like the world, as you said, needs so many more different people that are researching all these different things. I feel like that's how we're going to progress as society as well. And yeah, so no, you make amazing points. I just wanted
Thank
to
you.
also know what like your future like aspirations or goals are. Do you want to take your online like, you know, go further on, or you know, is there anything you're planning to do? It's really interesting to know. Yeah.
So for me, in an ideal world, I'd love to do 50% research and then 50% science communication.
Yeah.
And so I've always wanted to be like a TV science presenter. Like I'd love to do like documentaries and cool
Yeah.
stuff like that. Like that would be my absolute dream. And then alongside that, yeah, carry on with my research basically. And so I'm really into like medical imaging. I'm currently doing, so in a few weeks' time, my experiment starts where we're looking at basically what happens to iron samples under extreme conditions, so high temperatures and high pressures. And basically, we can find out what happens inside the interiors of like Neptune and Uranus, so these like gas giants in our universe. And so, being able to do like lab experiments on the small scale and then basically extrapolating them up to astrophysical scales is super cool because like we don't necessarily have the means to go out there and like probe Neptune and Uranus because they're so far away and it's really really hard. And
Yeah.
so being able to do stuff like that on a small scale and basically find out about what happens in our universe in the lab is like amazing. So if I could just basically like carry on the two, keep inspiring people, keep like getting all that information out there and like,
Yeah.
but then also still do the science, that would be my like career goals, like I would love to do both. And I kind of do that already. So like in my everyday life, I kind of almost 9 to 5. Like when there's an experiment, it's kind of like 6 in the morning until like 4 in the morning kind of vibes when an experiment's happening. Because you've
Yeah.
only got a short amount of time
To
in
do. Yeah.
a national lab, and so you kind of you want to get the best data that you can. But then alongside my research, I go home and I like make videos or write blog posts or I write articles for Forbes
Yeah.
or I go into schools and I do events for schools and like stuff like careers or like networking with them. And so I basically try and do both. And it's hard putting in the time for that. But I think if you're passionate about something, you will always find time for stuff.
Yeah.
And if I'm passionate about it and I want people to be as excited as I am about like science and physics and if I can do that, then I will do that. And so I just if I could do both and have a social life, that's amazing.
No, that sounds amazing. Yeah, everything that you're doing is amazing, and
Thank you.
just the fact that you're passionate as well. I feel like we need more passionate people, in whatever respective fields that they're in. So it's amazing, and really inspiring what you do. Thank you, and thank you for taking
Thank you
the
so
time.
much.
That's all the questions that I had. If you have anything to add, I don't know, but yeah, that's it.
I think I just want to leave with like a few words of like, like I said before in one of the previous questions, if you're passionate about something, don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something. Because there have been many times in my field where people are like, you're crazy going to America, or like, you're crazy, like, you won't be able to go to university. And that was like my head of year at school. And so even your teachers can be not supportive. And I think remember to surround yourself with supportive people, and if you don't have those people, there is like online communities now that will help you support you through stuff like that. And I think if there's someone that you can talk to about stuff like that, do it. Like I'm always open. I always say to people like, if you have a problem, tell me and we can solve it, make an action plan. And I think if you're passionate about something, don't let anyone crush your dreams. You will get there eventually. Sometimes it might not be a straight path, but you can make it happen. So that's what I'd like to finish with.
That's amazing. I couldn't have said it better.
But, thank you so much for having me.